Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
Hey everyone, I'm MacKenzie and I'm your guest host today. I'm sitting here with Emerald Palate, also known as Adria. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's just jump right in. What is Emerald Palate and how did you get started?
Yeah, so the Emerald Palate is a resource to help people discover the Pacific Northwest, mainly through food makers and different types of travel adventures around the region and surrounding states. I kind of extend into places like Idaho and BC and that. I do that through a lot of free content on my website or Instagram, but I also offer self-guided food tours of Seattle, travel planning services where I help people create custom itineraries. And then I am hoping to relaunch small group tours to different areas in Washington. But unfortunately, my first one started March 2020 and I had to cancel it. So haven't brought those back yet.
Yeah, the pandemic kind of put a stop on a lot of things travel-wise, didn't it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Are you originally from Washington State? Are you from the Pacific Northwest?
I am not. I am a big fan of it though, because I came from the East Coast. I grew up in New Jersey. I went to school in upstate New York and moved out here about 15 years ago. So it's been a fair chunk of time. And I think that that's what made me just really in awe and appreciate it so much because there is still not a day that I don't gawk at Rainier when it's out. I just love this area so much.
After 15 years, you're definitely considered a local, I think.
I know, right? It flies by though, so much to discover.
What was your inspiration for starting this, the online sharing, where to eat, where to go, the itineraries? What was your inspiration for that?
Yeah, so the Emerald Palette has kind of like an interesting background in the sense that I'd actually started in 2009 as a street style blog. Any old school followers, right, might remember that it was called the Emerald Closet, and I was doing street style and documenting a lot of that. And it was pretty popular at the time because that was when street style, and like the intentional, not the intentionalist, the sartorialist was coming out, and there wasn't a big market in Seattle for people doing that. So if anybody's interested in doing street style, I would be a proponent of that because I think it's a gap missing in the market. And I started that because I was working in marketing. I was at a job that was just really boring me. But my job was reaching out to media to try to get them to cover the company I was working for. And through that, I discovered like blogs and, influencers before Instagram was around. And I thought this would be a good way to, you know, put some time to not be bored, I guess. And I did that, but I let it kind of go to the wayside because my interest in fashion just waned. And I had always had the plan when I started it that I wanted to have different brands. So the Emerald Closet was going to be style, the Emerald Palette was going to be food, and I had a few other ideas. But anybody else who does this knows it's like a ton of work. And so my ambitions that tempered them a little bit. And I was like, I'm not really interested in fashion anymore, but I've always been interested in food and travel. And so let me just rebrand into the Emerald Palette. And so I did that in about 2013. And I've always just been a person that all my friends came to for like, where should I go for this restaurant or this travel? Because I've always made really intense, like either spreadsheets or Google Maps when I travel, and all of my friends would ask me for them. And I had one friend just be like, why don't you like sell these or put them on the internet? And I was like, it's a really good idea. And I think that was kind of the pivot point of like making the Emerald Palette a thing and how all of my services kind of manifested to what they are today.
So anytime you go on a vacation, do you have a full-on spreadsheet of what you're doing and where you're going and like a timeline too?
I'm so nerdy and intense. Yes, it is really embarrassing when I say it out loud. But yeah, since Google Maps has launched, that's been my go-to. So I make Google Maps. I try to organize them by like food and activities and that. And I just found that kind of really helped me get a sense of a place before I go. So that, when I do serendipitously come across something, it's because I'm walking in an area that the map is telling me, oh, this is a concentration of things, or oh, this is me driving to the middle of nowhere to get this one thing. So yeah, it's funny. I'm very much a planner, but my planning is usually just around food and like farting around areas to go into shops. So it's kind of serendipitous in a lot of ways when I'll just like jump into something, but I am not the type that could just show up to an area with no plan. Just not my style.
I definitely am with you on that. I cannot stand going on a vacation and just being like, oh, well, whatever we find today will be lovely. I'm like, no, we need the list.
I
I
know.
need to know where we're eating. I need to look at the menu. I need to know what's going on.
Exactly, exactly. A lot of people aren't like that, and that's why I had started my travel planning services because I am not my client, and that's okay. Like I'm looking to help the people who are not into that intensity, but kind of like the idea of having somebody to plan it, but they just don't go. They don't want to do it themselves. I think that's usually the reason people don't do it. It's because it's a lot of work to think about it. So.
I definitely agree with you on that. It is a lot of work to plan it out. Are the people that are coming to you for the itinerary planning, I'm guessing they're not from the Pacific Northwest, then they're probably coming from other parts of the country or maybe even from abroad?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really good mix, which surprised me because I thought it was going to be mostly people who were traveling here. And I would say the majority of people that I work with are the ones that aren't from here are from the US. So there's been a few that are coming from abroad, but I would say they're mostly people coming from Texas or like Iowa and like more that, I guess, central area of the US. But I also have a lot of local clients. So they're just looking to have a getaway to an area that they don't know as well. And so it's pretty even mix actually.
Do you also include like hotels and shops on your itineraries?
Yeah, totally. So how it kind of works is that I am very similar to a travel agent. So I have a agent's license, but the only difference is I don't book things, but I plan everything else. So what I do is once I start working with a client, they fill out a travel questionnaire to kind of let me know their interests and preferences, and it's pretty detailed. And then what I do is I do everything from finding accommodations, sorting out the transportation they need, especially with things like the Washington State Ferry. That's usually something that intimidates a lot of people. So I do a lot of hand holding with that. And then I fill in activities for them to choose from to give me an idea like, what are you interested in? And then I put all of that into an itinerary so that every hour of their trip is planned for. And that doesn't mean that they're doing something every hour, because one of the questions I ask is like, what's your pace of travel? But it means like the itinerary will say, okay, these 2 hours are back at the hotel to chill, or this hour is going to be going to do this activity. And so it really helps people not have to think if they don't want to. But then I also include like sort of optional swap ins that they can do on a whim if they feel like it. So it allows people to have that flexibility, but also if they just want to show up and not really have to think about it, it lays everything out for them. And so the only thing they need to do is like book the accommodation directly or make a reservation or whatnot directly.
That honestly sounds like such a nice way to travel.
No, it totally is.
How long would you say if someone wanted, for example, like a 3-day itinerary from start to finish, like they fill out the questionnaire, how long does it take you to get, say, a medium paced traveler a 3-day itinerary?
Yeah, so I usually ask people, my preference is if people book me at minimum a month in advance. And the reason for that is, especially if it's the busy travel season, it really limits their accommodation options if they're trying to do like a last minute trip. But it also depends on like where they want to go and their preferences, right? That depends. It really depends on like how much they want to be involved with giving feedback, how sort of picky might they be. Everybody has a little bit of a different, style. And so I like to say it's like a minimum of a month, just because I think that makes it less stressful for everybody. But there have been some that I've done a quicker turnaround where it makes sense. But I wouldn't say it's like a week or anything. So I usually can't take on clients that are like, hi, I'm traveling this weekend. Can you help? It is a lot of work for me too.
Of course. How do you go about adding something to either the itinerary or on your website or Instagram? What makes, for example, a restaurant worthy for you to recommend? What does it have to have for you to be like, okay, this has my stamp of approval?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first and foremost, especially for the content that shows up on my Instagram or my website, everything has been vetted by me. I don't share anything that hasn't been. And if I do, then I say it in there. Like I have a few articles that are about, for example, the best hikes, and some of them I haven't been on, but I know from all of my hiker besties, some of them even have contributed to those articles. They've vetted it. So I do a lot of vetting of content before I share it. And then for my travel planning clients, sometimes they're getting the benefit of like my intense maps that I've made for myself of things that I've read. Oh, you definitely got to go here. And I'm very straightforward. If I'm like, hey, I haven't been here yet, but so and so recommended or has like this many reviews. And so I'm always really straight up, but I always give preference to my recommendations. Those usually only come in if they are, they either have certain dietary or preference needs, or if their trip is like super long. Like I've planned trips that are like 12 to 14 days, and it's like, okay, we're running out of my personal short list. So here's some things that I've curated that are on my list to travel to. But yeah, I do a lot to vet and make sure that it's something that I would recommend. And I also am very big on making sure that it's a local brand. I don't share many national chains or anything. So I want to give people sort of the essence of the Pacific Northwest and support small businesses.
Definitely. You also do neighborhood food tours. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about those? Like start to finish, what does a neighborhood food tour look like?
Yeah. So the biggest difference between an in-person food tour and the food tour I offer is that they're self-guided. So there's no tour guide, there's no group of other strangers that you're going with. But that's where the biggest difference is, because if you've ever gone on an in-person food tour, basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to recreate that structure, the stories you hear, the recommendations and the insider tips of what to get, and putting it in a self-guided format. So what it looks like is like when somebody purchases it, it's a digital download and a PDF that they can easily open up on their phone. And then I include a Google map with walking directions because all of it is walkable. I try to hone in on neighborhoods where it's a walkable area and concentration of food, similar to a in-person food tour. And then it literally is like, here's some background, here's history of this place. Here's things to know before you go, the best time to go, how to get there transportation wise if people will not have a car. And then it goes into an actual itinerary. So all of them have about 8 to 9 stops. And it says, okay, start at 11 a.m., for example. Stop 1, go here, get this. Here's information about it from like my own personal story. I do a lot of interviews with the restaurants. So there's interviews with them in there. And then they go through the itinerary. And then at the end, I include worthy mentions of other restaurants or bars or whatnot that I really love in that area, so that if people want to swap it out, if they're traveling on a time that, maybe that one restaurant that's on the actual core itinerary is closed, then they have options for swapping out. And then the last thing is info about things to do that aren't eating that I really like in there. Because, even champion eaters usually need to take a little bit of break on these food tours. It's a lot of food.
Yeah. Sounds like a nice way to spend the day, though, especially being able to go at your own pace and not having to worry about, like you said, being in a group of strangers.
No, totally. And I think there's like a lot of benefits to that too. Like, I think one is for all of the introverts out there, myself included. I love taking in-person food tours when I travel, but I get really anxious about having to talk to strangers. That's just me. And so I love the idea of that. But the other things are like, if anybody has any mobility issues, there could be a lot of anxiety around keeping up with people. And then the other thing is just like always wondering, like, are you getting the top tier recommendations? Are you getting like the B or D list? Because before I started them, I actually looked at in-person food tours. I'd considered that, but just from like, I just realized from an operational reality standpoint is that not all restaurants can or want to work with groups, whether that be their space constraints, they're too popular and they don't feel like they need that kind of source of exposure or whatever. And then I just realized like, oh, there's places I want to recommend, but I can't realistically put them on an in-person tour. And so that was like that kind of went against my own ethos in life. And so that's how the self-guided came out to be.
How do you determine which neighborhoods you're going to include on the different food tours? And how many neighborhoods do you have at the moment that you have these self-guided food tours for?
Yeah, great question. So, in terms of how I decide the neighborhoods, there's a little bit, there's kind of a checklist in my head that I use. I mean, the first one is I give preference to neighborhoods that do not get a lot of love, in terms of like promoting to tourists. Because if you look at any guidebook, basically all guidebooks and tourists stay in like the downtown core area. So I like to give preference to neighborhoods that I think are really the heart and soul of Seattle, but most people who are visiting don't go to. And so that's kind of my first one. The second one is like, do they have a concentration of restaurants that are conducive to a walking tour? Because again, I'm trying to make it, a food crawl day, whether you're a local or a tourist, and it's just logistically doesn't make sense to have to drive all over. And then the last one is it a neighborhood that I love, have a lot of favorite restaurants, and one that I basically tell all of my personal friends to go to if they were going to travel here and hadn't been here. Because yeah, like I said, I do a lot of vetting. And for my food tours, nobody pays me to be in that. I don't accept anything like that because I don't want to, yeah, I just don't want to take kickbacks or anything. And so I personally reach out to all of the restaurants and I'm like, hey, I'm going to include you, no charge or anything. The only thing I ask is letting me interview you because I like to get information for it. So that's how I decide. And the three that I have right now, I have three. I have Ballard and Fremont, which were my first ones. And that's because I love those neighborhoods. I've lived in those areas the whole 15 years that I've lived here. And then I just last week, or actually this week, this Monday, what time is it? I don't even know. This week, I launched my Georgetown food tours. Oh, time's a circle, right? And these days, but yeah, this week I launched Georgetown, which I'm super excited about because I feel like nobody really talks about that neighborhood. And it's such a fun, artsy neighborhood that has kind of drums to its own beat. I know Fremont calls itself the center of the universe, but I don't know. I think Georgetown could give it a run for its money.
I think you're definitely right. Nobody really ever talks about Georgetown online. It's
No, they
not on the
don't, but it's such
radar.
a gem. Yeah, and I'm like super into vintage shopping, like decor, and from like the past 10, 15 years I've lived here, that area and Soda were like my go-tos. And so I'm like, why is nobody coming here? It's so cool. So hopefully help people discover it.
I hope so. Are there any neighborhoods that you have like in mind that you would like to add that you haven't added yet or
Oh, yes, I have so many. I'm actually my goal was actually to launch more than just one, and so I'm a little behind on that, but they just take so much work because I go to the neighborhood multiple times to capture new content, interviewing the businesses and so forth. But yes, I have a bunch on the short list. I really want to do the Central District. I think that that's
Mhm.
like a really awesome spot with a lot of really awesome restaurants that should be getting more love. West Seattle is another place that I'd recommend. I just love that area. And I don't think that many people go to it, but their foodie scene is really good, especially for pizza. Weirdly, all of like the really good pizza places are in West Seattle. Um, yeah, maybe I should do like a pizza only edition, but that's an area I really want to do. And then I've definitely thought about doing like Capitol Hill or Greenwood is another area. Maybe Edmonds, going a little bit on the outside of the city proper, Burien. So yeah, I have a list of a bunch. It's just like trying to knock them down and get through the list. It's a lot.
I definitely think you should work on West Seattle because I lived in West Seattle for a while and I worked in a restaurant there. And the food in that part of the city is just, it is so good. There's so many good options and so many great coffee shops and just, oh, I love it. I love that area of the city.
Me too. I have like all of these lists of restaurants I need to visit, not even just for my food tour, but just, in life. And my West Seattle one is obnoxious. There's just so many restaurants and bars and that there. So
I believe you. If there was this might be a tough question. If there was only one restaurant that you would recommend to people to visit when in Seattle,
oh gosh.
what would it
That's
be?
the hardest question. Oh gosh. I should have like
Or maybe
prepared this.
maybe top 2 or 3. I don't know.
Okay, I can maybe give my top three, I guess. Let's do that.
It's painful, I
All
know.
right. Well, I can give you this might maybe be my number one because I literally recommend it to everybody that I'm doing a trip plan for in Seattle because I love it so much. It's Rock Creek in Fremont.
Hmm.
I just love Rock Creek. If people aren't familiar, they are a seafood focused place, very Pacific Northwest style menu, focusing on local ingredients and that with a lot of fish, but also other things for people who aren't big fish eaters. And they're just consistently awesome, great ambiance. And I, again, feel like it's a restaurant that people who are really into food know, like, yeah, they're a popular place, but also they don't get as much credit, I feel, as other places. And I think one of their low key best things are their desserts. Like, nobody's talking about their damn desserts, and they are so good.
What do you
So,
usually
yeah,
get for dessert there?
they make these like cups. They're mason jar cups of desserts,
Mm.
and I usually get both of their s'more cup and their key lime
Ooh,
pie cup. It's like I can't choose, so I'm just gonna get both.
that
Um,
sounds good.
they're just mind blowing, and they're so comforting and classic. So they're like, oh, maybe that's like the not the most creative dessert ever, but then they're like making their own marshmallow meringue, and then they're like making their own graham cracker, and they're recreating that nostalgia with the flame to make it roasted. So definitely, even if you just go there for desserts, I love Rock Creek. So that's probably one. I love Delancey up in Ballard as well. They do wood fired pizza. I remember going to their soft opening when they opened a long time ago when I first moved here, was nostalgic for the East Coast. And I literally teared up when I tried their Brooklyn pie. It tastes exactly like the pies from back home. And so always have a special place in my heart for Delancey that I would say is a little bit more on the casual side compared to Rock Creek. Uh, and then, geez, I guess the last one for like if people want a super fancy restaurant, hmm, there's just so many good ones. I mean, I really like Sushi Kashiba is a classic. A lot of people, I tell people to go there because it's like a quintessential Seattle experience and they make excellent sushi. So that would probably be one of the tops that I recommend, and that's in downtown in the market.
Those are some really good options.
It's hard. I mean, the fine dining one switches out, but yeah, I would say that that's one that's often on the list.
I think I'm gonna have to go to Rock Creek because homemade marshmallows are just, it's like a hug. It's just like
Oh,
eating a hug. especially when you've tried to make your own marshmallows and realize how difficult it is. When
Mm.
someone can master that, you appreciate it even more.
Totally, totally. And I love that they do have a menu that like it has dishes that changes and that with the what's in season, but there are a few that have always been on there, and I just pray that they will never take them off because they're my go-tos. Like I'm finding it harder and harder to try new dishes because I find a new favorite and there's like four that I always get, and so I'm like, okay, how can I fit a fifth or a sixth dish on the table? And they have a great brunch too. Just like I'm a big fan all around.
All right, shout out to Rock Creek. So
They
let's
did
talk
not
about
sponsor this.
maybe they should.
I know.
All right, let's talk about day trips from Seattle. You're in Seattle, you want to see more of the surrounding areas, get out of the city a little bit. Where do you think people should go?
Oh, great question. So many places. I think like one of the first places I recommend to people who are ready to get out of the city, if they're not either from here or maybe they just moved here. I love the islands around Seattle, and we're very fortunate that we have a few that are only a short ferry ride away. So Bainbridge or Vashon, I think, are the most reasonable for like a day trip. But you could also do Whidbey in a day trip if you're ambitious. Honestly, you could do the San Juans too if you're ambitious. But I would say Bainbridge and Vashon are the best. And when I tell people like how to pick between the two, I say Bainbridge is the best for like if you like wine because they have a lot of wineries, and if you like shopping, because I think that island has the best concentration of like a core downtown shopping area with cute local shops. And you can technically visit. That's the only island you could visit without a car, because all of the others, like the ferry, drops you off in like no man's land, and it would just be unreasonable to not have a car. So that and Vashon is the place to go for food. Like there's just so many awesome farms and food scene there. But I also like people who don't want to deal with the ferry. I really love north of Seattle in the Skagit and Whatcom County areas. So whether, going to Skagit beyond the Tulip Festival is like my favorite. There's just so many farms up there. And that's actually the area that my small group food retreat was going to be in March 2020 when I was going to do that. There's just so much going on there. I don't feel like a lot of people know that they're like looked at as one of the best grain areas in the US. Like they're doing a lot of interesting things, especially because there's the college up there that does fun things with grain. That's beyond my knowledge, but they do a lot of interesting things with trying to restore heirloom grains, and then a lot of the local businesses around there actually use those grains. So you have like breweries using those grains and the malts created from them. You have malt companies, they're the middleman that kind of helps the grain get from farm to those businesses. But then it's on the coast, so you have like a ton of oysters, a ton of seafood and shellfish. So just love that area, basically starting from like La Conner up through Bellingham. I just think is such a gem. So those are great day trips. And then south, I think not a lot of people who live in Seattle go to Tacoma or Olympia. Like they're just like, oh, what's there? But I think that there's a
Yeah.
lot going on there. And I know a lot of my followers live in the South Seattle and the areas down there, and they're always talking about Olympia and Tacoma. And so I think that those are super cool areas as well.
I went to high school in Tacoma.
Nice.
And I love it. There's so much to do, and it's still a city, but a lot less of the city feeling that you get in Seattle. Like it's city, but kind of with a smaller town vibe to it. And there's so much to eat and drink and do, and the waterfront is just gorgeous.
No, it totally is. And I think that a lot of people don't realize how pretty Tacoma is because it's on the water. And yeah, the food scene, there's a lot of like under the radar places that I feel like doesn't get a lot of love. So literally anytime I go anywhere south, I'm like, okay, where on my obnoxious list of Olympia or Tacoma can I tack on this trip? So awesome area.
Have you ever been to MSM Deli in Tacoma?
No, but it's on my list because I've heard everybody says that it's so awesome. I'd actually tried to go there on our way to Seabrook a few weeks ago, but it was a day that they weren't open. It was outside their hours. So one
You
day.
need to go. Everyone listening to
Oh,
this, the next time when you're in Tacoma, go to MSM, get the Mike's Deluxe. Thank me later. It is the best sandwich you will ever eat in your entire life. I swear. So good.
oh, Mike's Deluxe. I'm gonna write that down because it didn't have it written down what to get. So I'll make sure not to make that amateur move.
It's the absolute best. Where outside of the Pacific Northwest do you still have on your bucket list? I mean, to see, it could be in the States, it could be abroad. Is there somewhere that you're like, okay, that is my dream. I want to go there. I want to experience
I mean, literally everywhere. Like I love traveling. I do. And I do before the pandemic, especially, I do travel a lot internationally. I just I take those as more vacations and don't write or share about them beyond my Instagram stories. But I love international travel. I really want to go to Iceland. I've only ever flown through it and somehow have never been able to make that whole deal work of like, oh, do a stopover. Because I swear every time I look, it like isn't a thing when I'm traveling through Iceland.
it? Oh,
So I would love to go there. Yeah, I mean, I really want to go to like explore the Beaujolais area of France. It's like one of my favorite wine grapes. For people who aren't familiar, it's kind of like a Pinot. It's a Gamay grape. Would love to explore there. I haven't been anywhere in South America, which is like totally embarrassing. So I'd love to explore more there. Brazil and that. So yeah, I mean, my international travel bucket list is huge. And in terms of the US or North America, I really want to explore more of the Kelowna area in Canada, and then like Banff and Calgary, like that whole scene, and more of the Vancouver Islands. I think those areas are similar to the vibe in Pacific Northwest with their agricultural and outdoor focus. And then I just went to New Orleans for the first time this past March. I can't believe it's been that I haven't done it, but I want to explore more of the US, like Charleston and Asheville and those areas. So very big bucket list.
I've never been to New Orleans, but that's also high on my bucket list of places to go, I have to say.
Oh, I always talk to my partner. I'm like, should I like sell this itinerary I made because it is super intense. It would make no sense on my brand. For my brand, it's like Pacific Northwest, and then here's the random New Orleans thing. But I swear, it's like I spent probably like 70 hours putting it together. I just so much food.
I was just gonna ask you, do you feel like when you travel that you do you feel the stress of making itineraries even if they're not Pacific Northwest related? Because I feel like that's a good idea. That's a good niche to have. Just itineraries in general for places that you
No,
go that you vetted that you know are good.
no, you're making me excited. So you're telling me it's not weird to be Pacific
No,
Northwest, but
not
then
at
have these random.
not at all. Because it would like you think the people that live in Washington could be like, oh, I want to go to New Orleans. I've heard of her before. Let's check out her itinerary for that. I think it would be
Oh, okay.
great. You
You're
should
bringing
do
up a
it.
lot of ideas. Yeah, because honestly, I go ham when I travel. So yes, I feel the stress of travel. The FOMO is so real when I travel. I like, and I do like super obnoxious things too. Like we literally had like 9 meals one day in New Orleans because I was like, we just got to eat at all of these places. It'll make sense. I don't
I
know.
need
Like
to
it's.
travel with you. I think we would get along great.
I know. And it's funny, one of my past travel planning clients who said that they were really into food, I like was like, let me map you out a little food tour. And they were like, wow, this is a lot. And I was like, oh, okay, let me dial that back. Because yeah, I
Oh,
just love eating. And so when you go to places like New Orleans, like you should have seen my Google map. You could barely see the map. There were so many pins. And then my short list was like 100 restaurants. So Yeah, I
Wow.
definitely feel the stress.
How many beignets did you eat? I mean,
Oh gosh, yeah. It's funny. We only went to one. We went to Cafe du Monde, because I am much more of a savory person than I am a sweet.
mhm.
So yeah. We ate a lot of like po' boys. We went on like a little po' boy crawl. So
I love a good po' boy.
yeah, yeah. I love eating, and I just love experiencing local areas and culture and stuff. And so try to pack it in.
So going back to Seattle Pacific Northwest, how do you decide which new restaurant you want to try? Are you on Yelp? Are you on Instagram? Is it like from friends that you're hearing it?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I try to have a bunch of different resources and then look for themes. It's basically how I look at it. So I have a list. I write down pretty much every new restaurant that or bar or something that comes out that I'm like, oh, that's something like I should keep my finger on. And so I have like this whole like list organized by neighborhood and that. Um, so I have that. And then I also base it off of things like if I'm seeing like a bunch of people on Instagram are saying it, or like articles from a bunch of the foodie publications around here. I look at pretty much all of them. Like I'm looking at the Nosh Pit News. I'm looking at Eater, Seattle Times, like just all of them. So I look for, yeah, what are people kind of talking about? But then I also, how I prioritize it is that basically I create an editorial calendar for the next couple months or the half of the year. And I prioritize based on like what articles do I have coming next. And so I make lists of like, okay, I really need to put together a best sushi list. Jot down what do I consider the best sushi. And then I'll look at that list and I'll be like, I feel like I should do a little bit more research. And so then I'll make a list of like what sushi places do I need to go to and vet and try. And so then I'll just eat sushi for like months. That's yeah. So I like kind of move from cuisine to cuisine. Yeah, I do a lot of that.
I love
And
it.
then if there's an area that has like a concentration of restaurants, I usually just schedule like a little food tour for my partner and me. Sometimes we'll bring along my family because my 11-year-old niece loves food, bless her heart, and so she loves it. So I'll do stuff like that too.
That sounds fun. So it's safe to say your partner's also a foodie then.
Oh yes. I mean, gosh, I don't know if I could be with somebody who wasn't. I just love food so much. So yes, big foodie as well. And bless his heart being okay with not eating until photos are taken or video are taken or being my hand model. So
Being your hand model.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's funny. Going back to the San Juans, because I agree with what you said. If you're very ambitious, you can do it as a day trip from Seattle. However, I will argue to stay the night or two on the San Juans just to
Oh yeah.
truly get the whole experience. Do
Oh
you
yeah.
have
Oh yeah. I
any?
am Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, do you have any recommendations restaurant wise, what to do wise, all of that?
Yeah, yeah. So the San Juan Islands, I love it there. It feels like a getaway, but it's close-ish. But it
Yeah.
takes about 3 hours when all is said and done from Seattle. So, like you said, you can do it in a day trip, but not recommended. The most islands that the three islands most people visit are Lopez, Orcas, and the San Juan Island, the Big Island. Um, I love all of them for different reasons. My go-to probably is San Juan Island because I think it has the best mix of outdoor activities and viewpoints and restaurants and things to do. But I love all of them for different reasons. On San Juan Island, restaurant-wise, I really love Westcott shellfish, Westcott Bay shellfish. I really like duck soup is somewhere that I always kind of go. So food wise, I definitely recommend those places. And then I love like going over to the San Juan Island Sculpture Park. I think that's super cool there, that it's just like this park with all these sculptures that you can actually buy. They all have like really expensive price tags on them. So like, I don't know if
I
anybody's
didn't
buying them,
realize you
but you
could buy
can.
them.
Yeah. I thought that
What?
that was super cool. Yeah, there's so many artists on all of the San Juan Islands, but I would say the San Juan Island and Orcas Island have like a huge concentration of artists. So love it there. I would probably say my more favorite restaurants, like favorite, are on the other islands. So like on Lopez, I absolutely love Ursa Minor. They are just doing really incredible things with local ingredients. So they are destination dining for sure on Lopez. I love Matia. I've actually never said that restaurant out loud, so apologies if I'm saying that wrong. On Orcas, yeah, that one is just super great. And Hogstone is making great pizza, and I love Brown Bear Baking on Orcas. And yeah, so lots of really awesome food and drink areas on there. Oh, and there's this really cool cocktail bar called Barnacle Bar on Orcas Island that I always recommend people go to if they like cocktails and that.
What's your go-to
Yeah.
cocktail?
Oh gosh, I'm not like super cool and have like give me a Manhattan type drink that's like a classic. um, I'm not that cool. But I always gravitate towards cocktails that have bourbon or mezcal or
Mhm.
tequila in them. Those are kind of my jam. So especially if they use like savory or spicy ingredients, like I love, when they do
Yeah.
that.
I saw, going back to savory kind of, I saw on TikTok a woman putting jalapenos in her rosé. Have you seen that
Oh,
before?
that's
I
probably
know.
no, but I bet you it's awesome. Like I,
I
I
bet you
bet you it's
it's so
good
good.
if you get past the like, oh my God, you're defaming a beautiful bottle of rosé. If you get past that, yeah, because it's kind of like a spicy sangria. I mean, sangria, you put all
Yeah,
types of stuff in it, right? So
that's on my list
I'm
of
gonna try
things to
that.
try this weekend.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
So your first retreat was canceled because of the pandemic. Are you going to get another one up and going? Or are you just kind of playing it out by ear depending on what the rules are with COVID or what's on the books for that?
Yeah, I do want to launch it again. I'm probably not going to do it until at least 2023, probably the later portion of it, because yeah, I just want to see how COVID's going. I know everybody's like over it, and we all pretend that it's over, but it kind of isn't. So I'm trying to like, be be safe about that. But my hope is to actually just do the one I had planned in the Skagit area because it was literally all planned. I had launched it. People were like signing up. And then I was like, oh, sorry, I'm going to cancel this. So that one's ripe and ready to go. So I'd probably start with that one. But there's so many awesome areas. The two other areas that I had on my short list that I hope to do as well are the Chelan area. I love
Mm,
Lake Chelan and the wineries, and I have a bunch of friends who are doing interesting things and farms there. So that region, and then I love Columbia Gorge. That
yes.
whole area over there is so fertile and it has like the fruit trail, the farm trail, and the wineries and breweries, and obviously beautiful landscapes. So that's also on my short list. So
That's
hopefully they'll be
also an
back in
area,
2023.
I hope so. In the Columbia Gorge area, that is also a very overlooked part of the state, I feel like.
Totally. And I have my audience is very much like the Seattle, radius base in Washington. And I am just so amazed at how the mental model of Oregon is so far to people. And I'm just like, yo, I've done a day trip to Portland before. Like I've definitely
Oh,
done that.
heck
And
yeah.
so yeah, again,
Yeah.
another ambitious one like the San Juan Islands. It's a little ambitious, but it's doable. And so I love Oregon a lot. And so I love the idea of Columbia Gorge because then you can kind of go on both sides of the state and maybe the states and maybe make make people more open to Oregon not being too far.
I remember in high school when we got our driver's license, me and my girlfriend at the time, my friend Shannon, we would drive from Tacoma and go down to Voodoo Donuts in Portland and
I
then
love it.
drive back home. And sorry, Dad, that you're hearing this now, but our parents never knew. And so for me, the idea of spending the day in Portland always felt like, yeah, well, why not do it? You can drive down there, be there in a few hours.
No, totally. You could do that. I mean, you could do that with Vancouver too. I mean, yeah, the border
Yeah.
crossing is a little bit more annoying, but you can easily do it. So I love going on, kind of spontaneous adventures like that. And I hope people go to Oregon more because it's so great.
I mean, I know we're a Washington State podcast, but I will agree with you. Oregon is pretty cool.
But don't tell anybody we said that.
Don't let my dad hear that. Oh, is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you think our audience should know about you?
Well, no, I mean, you were super thorough. I mean, I think, and this is both me and I guess like honestly any sort of creator you follow on either Instagram or their blogs or TikTok or whatever, is that like so much thought goes into it for people who are like a business. I do consider myself a business, and I know that it's interesting because you get a lot of questions or feedback where like people they have a hard time wrapping their head around that. Me or somebody similar as a business, and they're like, oh, you're just like a cool person on the internet. And that's cool. Like, cause we try to be authentic. Like, I'm not like being a business and not being authentic, but I think people don't realize how much like thought or research, for example, goes into something. And so, sometimes I'll get a lot of questions and comments on Instagram posts or reels that definitely just don't assume good intent, I would say. And so they're like, oh, you missed this, or, oh, this isn't a thing. Did you make that up? And I'm like, no, I swear to God, I did look it up. I did research it. And so it's interesting that people don't always assume good intent. And it's like a motto I try to live in life, outside of the internet. And so I would just say, assume good intent and, be nice on the internet.
Be kind. There is a person behind the screen, even if you think there isn't.
I know.
So where can people find you that are interested in learning more about your itineraries or booking something with you?
Yeah, totally. So again, my name is Adria, but my business is called the Emerald Palate, and that's palette as in your mouth palette, not your paint palette. So it's spelled a little differently. And I'm on Instagram at Emerald Palate. And then I also have a website, www.emeraldpalette.com, and you can find all of the information there.
I will add that to the show notes as well for people that are listening, that they can find you easier.
Awesome. Yeah, I know the spelling is always a fun test.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on today.
No, thank you. I had so much fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.